Welcome back, everybody. So in today's episode, we're actually going to do some body work. I know last week was mostly me just yapping at the camera, but there was a lot of info for me to throw at you. To any of the DIY guys watching here, I hope I didn't deter you too much. I knew I was a little blunt in part of the episode last week. However, this is oriented towards you guys. I do want people to understand that it is possible to do this at home, but you're not going to get a quick 10-minute fix and have it look good. So we'll get more into it. I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about the tools we're using in this episode, and we're actually going to do some body work. Let's get to it. So on the roof here, we have a nice soft molding with a soft lip there. It's kind of hard to see, but that's going to give me a nice edge that I can pull back with tape, so we don't need to remove that roof molding. And then same with the front end here, we've got a nice soft molding here that we'll be able to, this is actually taped on, double-sided taped all the way up, so we don't want to be messing with that. It can be removed if you need to, but not necessary because we can pull that back easily to scuff underneath it and tape that off. And then along this edge here, we'll be pulling that the door moldings back with tape also, so we'll get into that when we get into the masking aspect of everything. But yeah, now we're going to get into doing the actual repairs. I'll show you guys what tools I brought in here today. Sorry, it's all on the floor, piled in from work. So we have, let's start over here. So we got just some various hand tools, just a bit set, a couple different style pullers. These ones I actually bought at Princess Auto. They were cheap. I think it was like 15 bucks for the pair, that one, and I don't know where my other one is, but got a shorter one of those. Just a couple sockets. We got our DA dual action orbital, bigger DA, a little more aggressive one, and our 9-inch or 8-inch happy wheel. This guy and this guy we may not be using, but I figured I'd bring them just in case. What else here? So we got some body hammers, a couple dollies, and body file. Shrinking hammer, we may or may not need that one on this job. I personally just like this guy. It's a good all-around workhorse with the longer pick on the end and then the flat base. And then we got our die grinder and angle die grinder. So we got some roll lock discs on these. It's just a more aggressive disc. And then we got just our strip disc, so this won't take off too much metal, mostly just paint. And then a variety of sanding blocks and an interface pad for my DA there. So we'll assess what we need for each different section here. There are some curves in this, so having this guy might come in handy. So yeah, let's get working on this. So to start off here, I'm going to take my orange wheel, this guy, and I'm just going to go along this edge, give myself a nice spot to get some wiggle wire on there, and then I'll probably make a ground spot down in here somewhere just because I do know I'm going to have to repair this. It's a little funky looking there, so we'll make sure that's all good as well. So make a spot for my ground here, clean that up, and then we'll use my panel beater to get some wiggle wire on there. So as you can see, we have that edge stripped as well as a spot for our ground here. I just stripped this bigger area because that's all going to get filler at some point here. So reason I didn't strip all the way up here, probably the area that we're going to have filler, depending on how all this comes out, is simply because when I'm yanking this, it's a lot easier to see on a glossy surface how it's popping out versus on a stripped metal surface. So we'll get this as close as we can by pulling on this edge, and then we'll start tapping on this and then stripping that for filler. I'll be using a little Vevor dent puller. This is off Amazon. I think it was 340 bucks Canadian. I'll throw a link in the description. And then I spent 25 bucks for the magnetic ground there as well. And I've got the tip set up here. So just a sort of wedge tip for our wiggle wire. It was a little bit longer to begin with. I cut it down for the size we're going to need. So we'll get this on there, and then we can start pulling on it with our slide hammer. And this is my first time using this thing, so crossing my fingers, it actually works. Nice flat spot would have been better. That might work. And the reason I'm wearing safety glasses doing this is sometimes these can kind of arc and spark quite a bit. I want to get it kind of right on the edge there. That kind of works. I don't think I have quite enough ground here. that might be the ticket. I could try cranking her up a little bit. There we go. That's a little better. So I do have a fire extinguisher on hand. It's just on my workbench right there. So something to always have handy. And then afterwards, so once we're done all our paint work, then we'll be using a cavity wax in behind here, because this will be burning the factory e-coat that's on the inside. Beautiful. Hopefully that's sturdy enough. So get this out of the way. And I'm not going to tap on it or anything quite yet. Just going to get the fingers on here. So I'm going to sort of pull it a little bit of a backwards angle because everything is sort of pushed forward there as well. And that is moving, just slowly. Slowly but surely. Oh, and we did just kind of break free there. Well, we started moving anyway. And I have been running back and forth, having a look at the other side there. I pulled off this bracket, the bumper bracket, retaining bracket on the other side, just so I can see, have a reference point for on this side, because everything is a little funky in here. There are some waves on the other side as well, not from damage, just the factory stamping, so sometimes you have to distinguish between that and the actual damage that's in there. And I'm just going to throw you guys on a time lapse here. I'll try to do some voice overlay for everything. Otherwise, it's going to be a really, really long video. So we're definitely not there yet, but we're definitely getting closer. I've got the bumper bracket here, which surprisingly wasn't damaged. Just flexed a little bit. It's actually fitting quite nicely here. Obviously, it's still a little messy in here. I definitely have a little more love to give it there. My problem down here, as you saw, I started up here, and then that wasn't really moving much, so I moved down here just because this was pushed in so far, it was sucking everything here down. I just went back and watched the time lapses, and if you guys do that as well, if you actually watch up here while I'm pulling down and in here, you can actually see this dent lessening every time I do a good pull down in this area. It's kind of neat because the metal is so stressed and all the pressure from down here. So problem down here is that it's 2 or actually 3 walls in some areas, metal. So it's not moving very well. If I were in a shop, I'd probably be welding tabs on and pulling with a tower versus trying to use a slide hammer for this. It was pushed in a lot more underneath here than I expected. The bumper cap there was quite resilient and surprisingly didn't get as damaged as badly as I'd expect. But yeah, this is another reason that estimates online don't really work from pictures. You can't see what's behind you. Even an estimate in person wouldn't have caught this. That'd be a supplement going off to insurance most likely for the quarter extension here for the repair. Because I've been working on this for about 2 hours now, just in this one area. Now, keep in mind, I am trained to do body work, but primarily do prep and paint, so this is not my day-to-day stuff, so it does take me a little bit longer than you would find a dedicated body tech doing. So yeah, I'm going to get in behind here, do a little bit of hammer and dolly work. I pull the vent here so I can get in behind there with the dolly. I'm going to move away from the wiggle wire and move back into using a slide hammer. So this guy actually attaches right to the electrode, and then that'll tack on. You can do a couple pulls, then twist her off, and then move on from there. So I'm going to start doing that. I'm going to move up into this area now, because down here, I think if I can get this corner, because this is still in quite a bit along here, so I'm going to start working out from back here. Because this one isn't so much pushed up, this one's just kind of in. So this one, I think once I pull that, that's going to help relieve some of the stress from in here. And then, well, let's see what happens up here. And then I'm going to have to move up into here, do a little more work in here, and then again using that, just the spot puller, I'm going to play around a little bit more in here, try to smooth things out a little bit. So it's now Sunday, guys. I started on Friday night just doing my first intro, and then did the disassembly and this metalwork yesterday. I've got, I want to say about four and a half hours into it overall. It took me about an hour and a bit to get everything disassembled, and then I've got about 3 hours into the metalwork here. As you can see, most of our bulge here is gone. There's still a little, you can kind of see a little bit of a line there, so I'm hoping that'll come down a little bit more as we do our finishing work over here. We're getting really close though. It's not a huge dip out and dip back in here, so that's good. As you can see, I do have some holes here which aren't ideal. I'm still sort of getting used to this new unit as far as the heat settings go and whatnot, so had it a little hot there. On the flip side though, it's if it's just popping off when you pull it, you're not using enough heat, so sort of a fine line there. So these I'm gonna have to weld up. I'll just tack weld those in with my MIG welder. Another good option for stuff like that is if you have one of the stud welders, like it looks like a gun and you weld the stud on there, you can actually just weld those in there and then just grind them smooth. Super quick, super easy. I don't have one of those on hand though, so we'll continue along with the metalwork here, play around a little bit more down here, and then hopefully get into the filler work and get some primer on this thing today. We're getting pretty close to the metalwork here. I'm gonna throw the bumper bracket on as well as the bumper end. I realize the bumper end isn't repaired yet, however, it is still roughly in the correct shape it should be. So we'll get that on there and make sure everything's looking good before we go any further. So it still looks like a mess, but we're getting quite close. So with our body line lined up down here, I just need to sort of tap this edge in just to touch that edge there. Aside from that, everything's following along pretty nicely. We're pretty snug in here. It's a little funky. I think once I weld in those little holes that I made earlier, once I weld all that in, grind it smooth, that should all line up nicely. I'm going to attack this right now, actually. Before I go too much further, I'm going to take a heat gun to this, because right now we have a bit of a concave bend here when it should be convex. And then the rest of this actually isn't too bad. I'm going to wipe off that paint transfer first, and then we'll just use the heat gun and reform this a little bit. Here I'm using the heat gun to heat up the back of the panel, get it nice and warm, semi-malleable, and then I can use my hand with a welding glove to work out any smoother or less abrupt imperfections. And then I use a fiber stick, which is a semi-rigid plastic stick that glass installers use. I use that guy to work out any sharper imperfections or creases. Sorry if that time lapse went by kind of quick. I'll just sort of explain what I was doing there. So more or less just taking my heat gun, nothing fancy here, just heating up the back of the panel for the most part, and then primarily using my fiber stick to try to work out some of the sharper creases and whatnot. And overall this came out pretty well. This is nice and convex again. This actually has a nice concave curve to it again. This was all wrinkled kind of funny, so I was able to straighten that out. This guy down here, hard to see on camera, but there's a bit of a crease in there. I tried to work that out from the backside as well. I find with the aggressive stuff, you can actually see where it's coming through on the backside. And yeah, just heat it up, work it out. With a thermoplastic like this, it's easy to work everything back to where it was. Easy. So at this point, we should be good to just sand and prime. We'll be sanding down the high spots. You can even take a body file and knock down some of the high spots too. Makes it easy. It's a neat trick to use. So we'll throw this back on there, have a look at it again, and then assess from there. So we keep getting closer here. I've now marked off my body line where it should come to in relation to where it is in the bumper there as well. As you can see, this edge here is still in a ways, nothing too drastic. Definitely welding that edge is going to help as I grind it smooth. And then up here, this actually has to get tapped in a little bit. So I don't know if you can see on camera here, but there's a little bit of a lip there. Not super significant, but it is there. So we'll work the metal a little bit more. I'm happy with where the bumper is. That's ready to be sanded down and primed, but we'll hold off on that until we're priming the quarter panel as well. So I'm happy with where everything is from where we were able to pull it to. Now we're going to get into welding up all these little pinholes that I made from tugging on it. And one thing I should mention, I don't have a welding blanket. However, if you do any kind of fabrication in your garage, you probably burn through gloves pretty quick. So I just keep my old gloves, and you can spread them out over things where you don't want any weld. I've got a couple jammed up in behind here just to prevent too much heat from getting transferred in there. It's not going to do a ton, but better than nothing. So with all of our tack welding done, all of our holes are filled, I'm going to keep the welder out and ready to go just in case we find any others while we're grinding, but we'll get these grind down, smoothed out. So I made a bit of a judgment call here. I really don't like doing this, but this edge was still in just a touch, and it was beyond the capabilities of what I have in my garage here to pull that out all the way. So I did run a couple beads of just tack welds along that edge. Looks real ugly right now, but we'll get that ground down. That'll give us more material to build off of. I'd rather, like I said, I don't like doing this. However, I'd rather have that edge be a layer of weld than to try to build that up with filler. So at the end of the day, this is going to be the longer lasting, better choice for the repair. So I've got my metalwork to within tolerances for filler. I'll be the first to say I'm not the happiest with how this metalwork turned out. Like, it's within spec for filler, but I'm not happy with it. I like doing metal finish on things, making it look really nice. Still requires some filler and whatnot, but in this case, it really just sucks being limited to the tooling you have in your garage. And that's and my garage isn't badly set up. I got the welding machine, stud puller, I got fancy side lighting, all that jazz. And that brings me to another point. I've been accused of gatekeeping on certain Autobody forums online when your average Joe comes along asking for suggestions on how to do it themselves, and usually people, including myself, just say to bring it to a shop. And then we explain how to do it properly, and then they whine and complain and argue, saying like, oh, this guy did it with rattle cans. It's like, well, go ahead and do fixes with rattle cans, but as you can see, I've got like 7-ish hours of metalwork into this one corner here, and it's still not perfect. And this is something I do for a living. But yeah, so that's one of the reasons I'm making this video, to explain people, like, hey, it's not as easy as just popping out some dents and slapping some paint on it. So we're going to get into the filler work here. So I'm going to hit all this with 40 grit on my DA. I am going to be doing a skim of fiberglass filler on this, just because of all the welding we did. If there's any microscopic pinholes there, I don't want any moisture potentially getting in behind past our what's it called, cavity wax, once we get it in there. So yeah, we'll do a skim of fiberglass filler, DA that off, and then we'll get into doing our actual filler. And with the metalwork done, we're going to call it quits for today's video. In our next video, I'm going to get into the filler work for sure, possibly the primer work. If you guys aren't subscribed and you want to see my next video, be sure to hit that subscribe button to get notified when it comes out. Thank you so much for joining me again today, guys. We'll see you next time.